Thomas McKenna stood on the wide porch of his ranch house, watching the sun rise over the Arizona hills. The morning air was cool and fresh. Soon it would be hot, but now it felt good on his face. He was a tall man with strong hands and kind eyes. His brown hair was already showing gray at 35 years old. The hard work of building a ranch had aged him some, but he was proud of what he had made. The ranch stretched as far as he could see. Green grass covered the valley where his cattle grazed. Water from the stream ran clear and cold. The house was built from good wood and stone. It had taken him 10 years to build all this. Every fence post, every building, every head of cattle meant something to him. But today, Thomas felt worried. He had to leave his ranch for many months. The cattle drive to Kansas would take him away from everything he loved. Still, he needed the money that selling the cattle would bring. The ranch needed new equipment and supplies for winter. "Thomas, breakfast is ready," called a gentle voice from inside the house. He turned to see Ayanna walking toward him. She was his first wife, an Apache woman with long black hair and smart dark eyes. Her people had taught her to heal with plants and herbs. She could cure almost any sickness or injury. Thomas had married her 3 years ago when her father, a wise Apache elder, had offered friendship between their peoples. "You are thinking too much again," Ayanna said, touching his arm softly. "Your face shows all your worries." Thomas smiled at her. "I cannot help it. Leaving you and the baby makes me feel sick inside." Ayanna was going to have their first child soon. Her belly was round and full. The baby would come while Thomas was away on the cattle drive. This made him feel terrible, but there was no other choice. "The baby and I will be safe," Ayanna said. "Your brother Henry will take care of us. And Senna will help me too." Senna was Thomas's second wife, also Apache. She was younger than Ayanna, with a quick laugh and brave spirit. Her father had been a great warrior before he died fighting other tribes. Senna was also carrying Thomas's child. Both women would give birth while he was gone. Taking 2 wives was the Apache way when making peace between peoples. Thomas had learned to love both women deeply. They cared for each other like sisters and shared the work of the ranch. Some white people in the nearby town did not like his marriages, but Thomas did not care what they thought. Henry McKenna came out of the house carrying a cup of coffee. He was Thomas's younger brother, 28 years old. Where Thomas was tall and strong, Henry was shorter and thin. His hair was lighter and his eyes were pale blue. He had come to the ranch 2 years ago after losing his job back east. "Morning, brother," Henry said. "The men are getting the cattle ready. We should be able to start moving them north by noon." Thomas nodded. "Good. I want to cover as much ground as possible on the first day." Henry looked at Ayanna's round belly and smiled, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Do not worry about anything here, Thomas. I will watch over your wives and make sure the ranch runs well." The way Henry said wives made Thomas feel uneasy, but he pushed the feeling away. Henry was family. He could be trusted. More voices came from the ranch yard. The cowboys were gathering the cattle and preparing for the long drive. Thomas had hired 20 good men for this trip. Some were Mexican, some were white, and a few were Apache. All of them knew cattle and could handle the dangers of the trail. Miguel Santos, the ranch foreman, walked up to the porch. He was an older Mexican man with gray hair and deep wrinkles around his eyes. He had worked for Thomas since the ranch started. "Boss, the cattle are ready," Miguel said. "We have 800 head, all good stock. They should bring top prices in Kansas." "Thank you, Miguel," Thomas said. "How do the men look?" "They are ready for the trail. Young Rodriguez is a little nervous, but this is his first long drive. He will do fine." Thomas trusted Miguel completely. The older man had taught him much about ranching and handling cattle. If anyone could help make the drive successful, it was Miguel. Senna came out of the house carrying a cloth bag. Her black hair was braided with small blue beads. She moved carefully because of the baby she carried. "I made food for your first days on the trail," she said, handing Thomas the bag. "There is dried meat, corn cakes, and medicine plants in case someone gets sick." Thomas took the bag and hugged Senna gently. "Thank you. Take care of yourself and Ayanna while I am gone. We will watch out for each other," Senna promised. "And Henry has promised to help us if we need anything." Henry stepped forward. "Of course I will help them, Thomas. They are family now." Again, Thomas noticed something strange in Henry's voice, but he could not quite understand what it was. Maybe Henry was just uncomfortable around the Apache women. Many white people felt that way at first. I need to show you the important papers before I leave, Thomas told Henry. Come to my office. The two brothers went into the house. Thomas's office was small but neat. A big desk sat near the window, covered with papers about the ranch business. Thomas opened a wooden box and took out several documents. These papers show that you can make decisions for the ranch while I am away, Thomas explained. You can buy supplies, pay the workers, and handle any problems that come up. But remember, this is only temporary. When I come back, everything goes back to normal. Henry picked up the papers and read them carefully. I understand, Thomas. I will take good care of your ranch. Our ranch, Thomas corrected. We are brothers. What is mine is yours too. Henry smiled, but again something flickered in his pale eyes. Of course. Our ranch. Thomas put his hand on Henry's shoulder. I know I can trust you. You are the only person I would leave in charge of everything I care about. They went back outside where the cowboys were mounted and ready. The cattle were moving slowly north, raising dust in the morning air. Thomas felt his stomach tighten. It was time to go. Ayana and Senna stood together on the porch. Both women looked sad but tried to be brave. Thomas kissed each of them goodbye. I will be back before winter, he promised. Take care of yourselves and our children. We will, Ayana said. Go safely, my husband. Thomas mounted his horse, a strong bay stallion named Thunder. Miguel and the other cowboys were already following the cattle. Henry stood beside the porch, waving. Take care of them, Henry, Thomas called as he rode away. I will, Henry called back. But as Thomas disappeared into the dust, Henry's smile faded. His eyes grew cold and calculating as he watched his brother leave with everything valuable on the ranch. 6 months had passed since Thomas left for Kansas. The Arizona summer had been hot and dry. Now autumn was coming and the air was getting cooler. The leaves on the cottonwood trees by the stream were turning yellow and orange. Henry McKenna sat at his brother's desk in the ranch office. But now he thought of it as his desk. The papers that Thomas had signed were locked in the wooden box, but Henry had other papers now. Papers that he had written himself. Mr. McKenna, called a voice from outside. The men from town are here to see you. Henry smiled and put away the papers he had been working on. Send them in, Jake. 3 men walked into the office. The first was Judge William Crawford, a fat man with a gray beard. His clothes were expensive but dirty. The second was banker Robert Whitman, a thin man with cold eyes who always wore black. The third was Sheriff Tom Bradley, a man who cared more about money than justice. Gentlemen, Henry said, standing up, thank you for coming out to the ranch. Judge Crawford sat down heavily in a chair. You said you had a business deal for us, McKenna. Henry poured whiskey for each man. I do indeed. As you know, my brother Thomas has been gone for months. Many people think he might not come back. The trail to Kansas is dangerous, Sheriff Bradley said. Lots of men never make it back home. Exactly, Henry said. And if something happened to Thomas, someone would need to take care of this ranch. Someone who understands how to run things properly. Banker Whitman leaned forward. What are you suggesting? Henry pulled out a paper from his desk. This document shows that Thomas gave me full ownership of the ranch before he left. He knew the dangers of the cattle drive. The 3 men looked at the paper. It was well made with official-looking writing and a seal. But it was a lie. Henry had paid a man in town to make it for him. This looks legal, Judge Crawford said slowly. But are you sure Thomas meant to give up his ranch permanently? Henry's eyes grew hard. My brother made some poor choices while he lived here. He married those Apache women and made deals with the Indians that hurt our community. He gave them too much food and supplies. He treated them like equals instead of keeping them in their place. Sheriff Bradley nodded. A lot of folks in town were not happy about that. Some people said Thomas was more Indian than white. That is why he signed this paper, Henry continued. He knew that if something happened to him, the ranch needed someone who would run it the right way. Someone who would not coddle the savages. Banker Whitman studied the fake document again. If this is real, then you would be the legal owner of everything. The land, the buildings, the remaining cattle. And you gentlemen would benefit too, Henry said. Judge Crawford, I would need legal support to make sure no one questions my ownership. Sheriff Bradley, I might need help keeping order on my property. And Mr. Whitman, I would need loans to improve the ranch and make it more profitable. The 3 men looked at each other. They all saw opportunity to make money. What about those Indian women? Judge Crawford asked. They are still living in the main house. Henry's face grew dark. That will be taken care of. They have no right to be there. When Thomas returns, if he returns, he will see that the ranch is better without them. But Henry was lying. He did not plan for Thomas to return at all. He had already sent men to find Thomas on the trail and make sure he never came home. After the men left, Henry walked to the main house. He could hear the sound of a baby crying inside. Ayana had given birth to a son 2 months ago. Senna's baby, a daughter, had been born just 3 weeks later. Both women were tired from caring for the infants. Henry knocked on the door. Ayana opened it, holding her crying baby. "What do you need, Henry?" she asked. Her voice was polite but cold. She did not trust Thomas's brother. "I need to talk to both of you," Henry said, pushing past her into the house. Senna sat by the fire, nursing her baby daughter. She looked up when Henry entered. "Is there news from Thomas?" she asked hopefully. Henry sat down without being invited. "No news, but I have something important to tell you both." The Apache women waited. They could see that Henry was different now. He was not trying to be nice anymore. "Thomas has been gone for 6 months, Henry said. "Many people think he is dead. Cattle drives are dangerous. Men die from storms, stampedes, outlaws, or disease." Ayana's face went white. "Thomas is not dead. We would feel it if he was." Henry laughed coldly. "Indian superstition. The truth is, Thomas knew he might not return. That is why he signed papers making me the owner of this ranch." "That is not possible," Senna said, standing up with her baby. "Thomas would never give up his ranch. This is his dream, his life." "Nevertheless, it is true," Henry said, pulling out the fake document. "This ranch belongs to me now, and I do not want any Indians living here." The 2 women stared at the paper. They could not read English well, but they could see it looked official. "Even if this paper is real," Ayana said slowly, "Thomas told us you would take care of us while he was gone. These are his children, your nephews and niece." Henry looked at the babies with disgust. "Half-breed children. They are not truly McKenna blood." Senna's eyes flashed with anger. "How dare you speak of our children that way? Thomas loves us and these babies. He will come back and he will be furious when he learns how you have treated his family." Henry stood up, his face red with anger. "Thomas made a mistake marrying you savages." He lowered himself and embarrassed the McKenna name. "I will not continue his shameful choices." "You cannot throw us out," Ayana said, though her voice shook. "We have nowhere to go with newborn babies." "You can go back to your people where you belong," Henry said. "I am giving you 3 days to pack your things and leave. If you are still here after that, I will have the sheriff remove you by force." Senna stepped forward, her baby in her arms. "And what will you tell Thomas when he returns? How will you explain sending away his wives and children?" Henry smiled cruelly. "Thomas is not coming back, and even if he did, he would thank me for cleaning up his mess." That night, Ayana and Senna sat together in the main house, their babies sleeping beside them. They were scared and confused. "Do you think Thomas could really be dead?" Senna asked quietly. Ayana shook her head. "My heart would know if he was gone forever. He is alive, but something is wrong. Henry is lying about something." "But what if that paper is real? What if Thomas really did sign the ranch over to Henry?" Ayana touched her baby's soft hair. "Thomas would never abandon us willingly. He loves us and these children too much. Henry is planning something evil." Outside, Henry met with 3 rough-looking men. They were not regular ranch workers. They were the kind of men who would do anything for money. "I want them gone in 3 days," Henry told the men. "If they will not leave willingly, make them afraid enough to run." "What about the babies?" one man asked. "I do not care what happens to half-breed brats," Henry said coldly. "Just get them off my property." The men rode away into the darkness. Henry looked up at the house where his brother's wives were trying to sleep. Soon he would have everything he wanted. The ranch would be his alone, run the way he thought it should be run. No more Apache women. No more mixed-blood children. No more of Thomas's weak kindness toward the Indians. Henry did not know that Miguel Santos, the old foreman, had been watching from the shadows. Miguel had heard everything. He did not trust Henry, and now he knew why. The older man slipped away quietly to write a letter. Somehow he had to warn Thomas about what his brother was planning, but Henry had thought of that too. All mail leaving the ranch went through him now. No letters would reach Thomas McKenna on the trail to Kansas. The winter wind blew cold across the Arizona ranch. Snow covered the hills and ice formed on the edges of the stream. Inside the main house, Ayana and Senna tried to keep their babies warm while they packed their few belongings. 3 days had passed since Henry's ultimatum. Neither woman wanted to leave, but they were afraid for their children. Henry's men had been watching the house, making threatening gestures and crude comments. Last night someone had thrown rocks at the windows. "We should go to my father's village," Senna said, folding baby clothes into a cloth bag. "Chief Nayeli will protect us," Ayana nodded sadly. "I hate to run away, but we have no choice. These babies need safety more than we need pride." The two women had grown closer during their months of waiting for Thomas. They shared the work of caring for the infants and comforting each other when fear grew too strong. Ayana's son was a calm baby with his father's brown eyes. Senna's daughter was more active, always moving her tiny hands and feet. A loud knock came at the door. Henry entered without waiting for permission. Behind him came Judge Crawford and Sheriff Bradley. 3 rough-looking men stood behind them. "Your time is up," Henry announced. "I told you to be gone in 3 days." Ayana held her baby closer. "We are packing now. Give us a few more hours." "No more time," Sheriff Bradley said. "You are trespassing on private property. The owner wants you removed immediately." Senna stood up, her baby in her arms. "Thomas is the owner of this ranch. He married us according to Apache law. We have every right to be here." Judge Crawford shook his head. "Apache law means nothing here. This is American territory now. Only American law counts." Henry pulled out his fake ownership papers. "These documents prove that this ranch belongs to me." Thomas signed it over before he left. "Those papers are lies," Ayana said firmly. "Thomas would never give up his ranch or abandon his family." Henry's face grew red with anger. "I am tired of listening to savage women call me a liar." He turned to his hired men. "Remove them from my property. Use force if necessary." The 3 rough men stepped forward. One of them grabbed Ayana's arm. "Come on, squaw. Time to go back where you belong." Ayana pulled away, protecting her baby. "Do not touch me." "We are leaving willingly." But the man grabbed her again, harder this time. "You will leave when we say and how we say." Senna tried to help her sister wife, but another man blocked her way. "Stay back or you will get the same treatment." Miguel Santos appeared in the doorway. The old foreman had been working in the barn when he heard the commotion. "What is happening here?" Miguel demanded. Henry smiled coldly. "I am removing unwanted guests from my property, Miguel." "This does not concern you. These women are Thomas's wives," Miguel said angrily. "They are carrying his children. Thomas left me in charge of protecting them." Sheriff Bradley stepped forward. "Thomas left his brother in charge, not you, old man. Henry has legal papers proving ownership of this ranch." Miguel stared at the fake documents. He could not read English well, but something felt wrong about the whole situation. "Thomas would not abandon his family," Miguel said. "Thomas made mistakes," Henry replied. "I am correcting them." The rough men began grabbing the women's belongings and throwing them outside into the snow. Baby clothes, food, and personal items scattered across the frozen ground. "Stop," Senna cried. "Our babies need those things." "Your babies need to learn that they do not belong here," one of the men said cruelly. Ayana tried to gather some of the scattered items while holding her infant son. The baby began crying from the cold and confusion. Senna's daughter also started wailing. "Please," Ayana begged. "At least let us take warm clothes for the children. They will freeze." Henry watched without emotion as his men continued destroying and scattering the women's possessions. "You should have thought about your babies before you refused to leave peacefully." Miguel could not stand watching anymore. He stepped between the men and the women. "Enough. I will not watch children put in danger no matter who gives the orders." One of Henry's hired men shoved Miguel roughly. "Get out of the way, old fool, or you will get hurt." Miguel was in his 60s, but he was still strong from years of ranch work. He pushed back, knocking the younger man down. Sheriff Bradley drew his gun. "That is assault on private property. I am arresting you, Miguel." "For protecting innocent women and babies?" Miguel asked in disbelief. "For interfering with a legal eviction," the sheriff replied. Henry nodded approvingly. "Take him to town and lock him up. I do not want him causing more trouble." As the sheriff led Miguel away in handcuffs, the old foreman called out to the Apache women. "Go to Chief Nayeli. Tell him everything that has happened. He will know what to do." The rough men continued their work, destroying anything they could not steal. They broke furniture, scattered cooking supplies, and trampled baby blankets into the muddy snow. "That is enough," Judge Crawford said finally. Even he was uncomfortable watching the destruction. Just get them off the property. Henry's men forced Ayanna and Senna toward the door. The women clutched their crying babies and tried to gather a few essential items from the scattered mess. Where are the horses Thomas left for us? Senna asked. Henry laughed. Those horses belong to the ranch now. You can walk to wherever you are going. We cannot walk to the Apache village with newborn babies in this weather, Ayanna protested. They will die from the cold. That is not my problem, Henry said without caring. But one of the ranch workers, a young Mexican man named Carlos, had been watching from the barn. He could not stand to see the women and children treated so cruelly. I will give them my horse, Carlos said quietly to Ayanna. Take turns riding. It will help with the babies, Henry overheard. You are fired, Carlos. Get off my property too. Carlos did not care. He helped Ayanna and Senna load their few remaining possessions onto his old horse. The animal was not strong, but it was better than nothing. Thank you, Senna whispered. Thomas will remember your kindness when he returns. If he returns, Henry said loudly. Which he will not. The two Apache women began their journey through the snow toward Chief Nayeli's village. It was 20 miles away through rough country. Ayanna rode first, holding both babies while Senna walked beside the horse. The wind was bitter cold and snow continued falling. After a few miles, they switched positions. Senna took the babies while Ayanna walked. Both women were exhausted and scared. They had not eaten much that day and their bodies were still weak from giving birth. As the sun set, the temperature dropped even more. The babies were crying from cold and hunger. Ayanna and Senna knew they might not survive the night if they could not find shelter. There, Senna pointed through the falling snow. I see smoke from a fire. They found a small cabin where an old Apache man lived alone. He recognized them and welcomed them inside. His fire was warm and he shared his food. The women were able to nurse their babies and rest for a few hours. Henry McKenna has stolen Thomas's ranch, Senna explained to the old man. He claims Thomas signed papers giving up his property. The old Apache man shook his head sadly. White man's law is often used to steal from others, but Chief Nayeli is wise. He will know how to help. At dawn, the women continued their journey. The old man gave them blankets for the babies and food for themselves. By afternoon, they reached the Apache village. Chief Nayeli was furious when he heard their story. He had known Thomas for many years and trusted him completely. The idea that Thomas would abandon his wives and children was impossible to believe. Henry McKenna has broken the peace treaty between our peoples, the chief declared. He has insulted our daughters and grandchildren. This cannot stand. The Apache women in the village gathered around Ayanna and Senna, offering comfort and help, but many of the warriors wanted immediate revenge against Henry and his men. We should ride to the ranch tonight and burn it down, said one young warrior. Henry McKenna must pay for this insult. Chief Nayeli held up his hand for silence. We will not act in anger. Thomas McKenna has always been fair with our people. We will wait for his return and learn the truth. But if harm comes to his wives or children, there will be consequences. That night, Ayanna and Senna lay in a warm teepee with their babies, safe at last. But their hearts were broken. They had lost their home and most of their possessions. They did not know if Thomas was alive or dead or when they might see him again. Do you think Thomas really signed those papers? Senna asked quietly. Ayanna shook her head. No, Thomas loves us and these children. Henry is lying about everything. But how can we prove it? Outside, snow continued falling on the Apache village. 20 miles away, Henry McKenna sat in Thomas's chair, drinking Thomas's whiskey, and planning how to sell Thomas's remaining cattle before spring came. Spring came slowly to Arizona. The snow melted and green grass began growing in the valleys. In the Apache village, Ayanna and Senna had survived the winter, but it had been hard. Their babies were growing, but the women themselves looked thin and tired. Ayanna sat outside her small teepee, grinding corn into meal. Her son played nearby on a blanket. He was 6 months old now and could sit up by himself. His brown eyes were alert and curious, just like his father's. Senna emerged from the teepee carrying her daughter, who was 3 months old. The baby girl had her mother's dark hair, but Thomas's strong chin. She was a fighter, always reaching for everything around her. The corn is almost gone, Ayanna said quietly, and the winter was hard on everyone. There is not much food left in the village. Chief Nayeli had done his best to provide for Thomas's wives and children, but the Apache people had their own families to feed. The arrival of 2 more women and 2 babies had stretched the food supplies thin. Some of the younger Apache men grumbled about the extra mouths to feed. They whispered that maybe Thomas had really abandoned his wives. Why should the tribe continue caring for women whose husband might be dead? Little Crow spoke against us again at the council meeting last night, Senna said sadly. He thinks we should leave the village and take care of ourselves. Little Crow was a warrior about 25 years old. He had wanted to marry Senna before she became Thomas's wife. Her choice of a white man had hurt his pride and made him bitter. Where does he think we can go with 2 babies? Ayana asked. We have no money, no horses, no weapons. An older Apache woman named Gray Dove approached them. She had been kind to the 2 younger women all winter, sharing food and helping with the babies. Do not listen to Little Crow, Gray Dove said. He speaks from wounded pride, not wisdom. Chief Nayeli still believes Thomas McKenna will return, but even Gray Dove looked worried. It had been almost 8 months since Thomas left for Kansas. Cattle drives usually took 4 or 5 months at most. If Thomas was coming back, he should have been home by now. Maybe we should try to contact Thomas somehow, Senna suggested. Send someone to look for him on the trail. Ayana shook her head. Henry controls everything now. He would not let anyone leave the ranch to search for Thomas, and we have no money to hire someone. At the McKenna ranch, Henry was making big changes. He had sold most of the remaining cattle and horses. The money from the sales went into his own bank account. He hired new workers who did not ask questions about Thomas or the Apache women. Henry had also started courting Sarah Whitman, the banker's daughter. She was 22 years old with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her father owned the largest bank in the territory. Marrying her would give Henry even more power and money. Sarah visited the ranch on a sunny spring afternoon. Henry showed her around the property, pointing out all the improvements he claimed to have made. It must have been difficult taking over when your brother left, Sarah said as they walked through the main house. Henry had redecorated everything, removing all traces of Apache influence. Gone were the beautiful blankets and pottery that Ayana and Senna had made. Instead, Henry had bought expensive furniture from back east. Thomas made some poor decisions, Henry said carefully, especially about the Indian situation. I have corrected those mistakes. Sarah nodded approvingly. Father says you have made the ranch much more respectable. He is impressed with your business sense. What Sarah did not know was that Henry was slowly going into debt. Selling the cattle had given him quick money, but ranches needed cattle to make long-term profits. Henry was spending more than he was earning, trying to impress Sarah and her father. When do you think Thomas will return? Sarah asked. Henry's face grew serious. I do not think he will return, Sarah. The trail to Kansas is very dangerous. Many men die from Indian attacks, stampedes, or disease. Thomas has been gone too long. Sarah looked sad. How terrible for you, losing your only brother. It is hard, Henry lied. But life goes on. Thomas would want me to continue building what he started. That evening, Henry met with his 3 corrupt allies, Judge Crawford, Sheriff Bradley, and banker Robert Whitman. They gathered in the ranch office to discuss business. The legal papers look good, Judge Crawford said, examining Henry's fake ownership documents. If anyone questions them, I can provide court approval. Sheriff Bradley counted a stack of money. And I can handle any trouble from the Indians. They have been quiet so far, but Apache can be unpredictable. Banker Whitman looked at the ranch's financial records. You are spending money faster than you are making it, Henry. This ranch needs more cattle to be profitable. Henry poured whiskey for each man. I am working on that. Once I marry Sarah, I will have access to more investment money. We can expand the operation and buy more cattle. What if Thomas really does come back? Judge Crawford asked. These fake papers might fool some people, but Thomas would know the truth. Henry's eyes grew cold. Thomas will not be coming back. I have made sure of that. The 3 men looked at each other uncomfortably. They did not want to know exactly what Henry meant by that statement. In the Apache village, Chief Nayeli called a council meeting. All the adult men and women of the tribe gathered around the fire to discuss important matters. We must decide what to do about Thomas McKenna's wives, the chief announced. They have lived with us all winter. Their children are growing, but we do not know if their husband will return. Little Crow stood up immediately. I say they should leave. We have our own families to feed. Why should we care for abandoned white man's women? Several other young warriors nodded in agreement. The winter had been hard and food was scarce, but Gray Dove also stood up. These women are not just any white man's wives. Thomas McKenna has always been fair with our people. He kept his promises and treated us with respect. We should not abandon his family in their time of need. An older warrior named Red Hawk spoke next. 8 months is a long time. If Thomas McKenna was coming back, he would be here by now. Maybe he really did abandon these women. Ayanna could not stay silent anymore. She stood up holding her baby son. Thomas did not abandon us, she said firmly. He loves us and these children. Something has happened to keep him away, but he will return. I feel it in my heart. Little Crow laughed mockingly. A woman's feelings are not proof. Thomas McKenna has forgotten his Indian wives and gone back to live with white people. Senna also stood, her baby daughter in her arms. If Thomas had wanted to leave us, he would have told us honestly. He would not have lied or made false promises. That is not the kind of man he is. Chief Nayeli listened to all the arguments. Finally, he spoke. Thomas McKenna has been a friend to our people for many years. His wives and children will remain welcome in our village until we know the truth about what happened to him, but we cannot wait forever. If Thomas does not return by the end of summer, then we will have to make other decisions. After the meeting, Ayanna and Senna returned to their teepee feeling scared and uncertain. They had until the end of summer to prove that Thomas was coming back. But how could they prove something they were not even sure about themselves? What if he really is dead? Senna whispered in the darkness. Ayanna held her sleeping son close. Then we will raise our children to know what a good man their father was. But I still believe he is alive somewhere trying to come home to us. Outside their teepee, the spring wind blew across the desert. Somewhere to the north, Thomas McKenna was indeed alive, but facing dangers that might prevent him from ever seeing his wives and children again. At the ranch, Henry McKenna sat in his brother's chair, planning how to get rid of the last evidence of Thomas's life in Arizona. Soon he hoped everyone would forget that Thomas McKenna had ever existed. Thomas McKenna wiped sweat from his face as he counted the money in his leather pouch. The cattle sale in Kansas had gone better than expected. 800 head of prime Arizona beef had brought top prices. After paying his men and covering expenses, he had enough profit to improve the ranch and provide for his growing family. But something felt wrong. Thomas had been trying to send letters home for weeks, but none of his messages seemed to be getting through. The postal service on the frontier was unreliable, but this seemed different. He had not received a single letter from Arizona since leaving home. "Boss, we should start heading back soon," Miguel Santos said, walking up to where Thomas stood outside the Kansas City stockyards. "The men are getting restless, and the weather will be turning cold before long." Thomas nodded. "You are right, Miguel. I am worried about Ayanna and Senna. Their babies should have been born by now. I want to get home as quickly as possible." Miguel looked concerned too. "I have been trying to send messages to the ranch, but I have not heard anything back. It is strange." "Maybe Henry is just too busy to write," Thomas said, but his voice showed doubt. Something in his gut told him that all was not well at home. The cattle drive back to Arizona would take them through rough country. They would face river crossings, possible Indian attacks, and the constant danger of stampedes. But Thomas was eager to get started. Every day away from home felt like a year. As Thomas prepared his men for the journey home, 2 travelers approached their camp. They were rough-looking men with hard eyes and guns on their hips. "You Thomas McKenna?" one of them asked. "I am." "What do you want?" The man smiled coldly. "We have a message for you from Arizona. Your brother Henry sent us." Thomas felt ice in his stomach. "What kind of message?" "The kind that is delivered with bullets," the second man said, reaching for his gun. But Thomas was faster. Years of frontier life had made him quick with a weapon. His Colt .45 was in his hand before the stranger could clear his holster. Miguel and several of Thomas's cowboys also drew their guns. "I would think real careful about your next move," Thomas said quietly. The 2 men looked around and saw that they were badly outnumbered. Thomas's crew of 20 cowboys all had their weapons ready. "This is not over, McKenna," the first man snarled. "Your brother wants you dead, and he will keep sending men until the job is done." The 2 assassins backed away slowly, then mounted their horses and rode off into the darkness. Miguel stared after them in shock. "Did they really say Henry sent them to kill you?" Thomas's face was grim. "That is exactly what they said. My own brother wants me dead. But why? What could Henry gain from your death?" Thomas thought about it for a moment. "The ranch. If I die, Henry would inherit everything, and he would not have to deal with my Apache wives or mixed-blood children. We need to get back to Arizona fast. Miguel said urgently. If Henry is willing to hire killers, there is no telling what he might do to Ayana and Senna. Thomas gathered his men around the campfire. Boys, we have a problem. Someone back home wants me dead. That means this trip just got a lot more dangerous. Young Rodriguez, who had been nervous about his first cattle drive, looked scared. What are we going to do, boss? We are going home, Thomas said firmly. But we will travel fast and watch for trouble. Anyone who wants to leave can take his pay and go. I will not force any man to risk his life for my family problems. Not one cowboy chose to leave. These men had worked for Thomas for years. They respected him and knew he was a fair boss who treated them well. We are with you, Thomas, said an older cowboy named Pete. A man should be able to go home to his family without getting shot in the back. Thomas felt grateful for his loyal men, but he also felt guilty about the danger he was putting them in. If Henry had hired professional killers, more attacks were certain to come. They broke camp before dawn and pushed hard across the Kansas plains. Thomas set a fast pace, changing horses frequently to cover more ground. He posted guards every night and told his men to stay alert for trouble. 3 days later, more assassins tried to ambush them at a river crossing. This time there were 4 men with rifles hidden in the rocks, but Thomas had expected trouble and sent scouts ahead. The cowboys were ready when the shooting started. In the brief gunfight, 2 of the assassins were killed and the other 2 were wounded and captured. Before he died, one of the killers confirmed what Thomas already knew. Henry McKenna is paying good money for your death, the dying man gasped. He wants to make sure you never make it back to Arizona. Thomas knelt beside the wounded man. Why does Henry want me dead? What has happened to my wives? But the assassin died before answering. Thomas searched the men's belongings and found letters that made his blood run cold. The letters were from Henry, offering large payments for Thomas's death. One letter mentioned cleaning up the Indian problem at the ranch. He has done something to Ayana and Senna, Thomas said grimly. We have to get home now. Miguel looked at the letters with growing anger. Your brother is not just a thief, Thomas. He is a killer. We should warn the territorial authorities. First we get home and make sure my family is safe, Thomas replied. Then we deal with Henry. They pushed even harder across Colorado and New Mexico. Thomas barely slept, driving himself and his men to cover as many miles as possible each day. The horses were getting tired, but Thomas did not care. His wives and children might be in terrible danger. As they traveled, they met other travelers who shared disturbing news. Several people mentioned hearing about changes at the McKenna ranch. There were rumors that Thomas had abandoned his Indian wives and given the ranch to his brother. People in the last town said your brother, Henry, is getting married to the banker's daughter, reported one of Thomas's scouts. They seemed to think you were dead. Thomas's jaw tightened. Henry is spreading lies about me, but why would people believe him so easily? Some folks never liked you marrying Apache women, Miguel said honestly. Henry might be telling them what they want to hear. At a trading post in New Mexico, Thomas met a traveling merchant who had more detailed information. I was in the territory town of Prescott last month, the merchant said. There was talk about the McKenna ranch. Seems the owner's brother took over when the original owner died on a cattle drive. Died? Thomas asked sharply. Who told you I was dead? The merchant looked confused. Are not you Thomas McKenna? But the brother, Henry, I think his name was. He had legal papers showing he owned the ranch now. Judge Crawford himself said they were proper documents. Thomas felt sick. Henry had not only stolen his ranch, but was spreading the story that Thomas was dead, and corrupt officials were helping him do it. What happened to the Indian women who lived at the ranch? Thomas asked. The merchant shrugged. Henry McKenna said they went back to their people where they belonged. Seemed like most folks thought that was for the best. That night, Thomas sat by the campfire staring into the flames. Miguel sat beside him. We will get your ranch back, Thomas, Miguel said quietly. And we will find your wives and children. What if they are dead, Miguel? What if Henry killed them? Miguel shook his head. Ayana and Senna are strong women, and Chief Nayeli would protect his daughters. They are alive, I'm sure of it. Thomas hoped Miguel was right. But as they got closer to Arizona, his fears grew stronger. Henry had shown that he was willing to kill his own brother. What might he have done to 2 Apache women and their babies? The next morning brought more bad news. A cavalry patrol rode into their camp with a warning. You men need to be careful traveling through Apache territory, the lieutenant said. There has been trouble with the local tribe. Some kind of dispute over broken treaties. What kind of dispute? Thomas asked. though he feared the answer. The Apache claimed that a local rancher broke faith with them, drove off tribal women and children. The Apache are talking about war. Thomas's heart sank. Chief Nayeli was a peaceful man who had always honored his agreements. If he was considering war, something terrible must have happened to his daughters. "We have to get home," Thomas told his men. "Ride as hard as the horses can stand." Behind them, more of Henry's hired killers were following their trail. Ahead lay Arizona and whatever horrors Henry had committed in Thomas's name. Time was running out for everyone Thomas loved. Thomas McKenna rode Thunder hard across the last hill before home. The late summer sun was setting behind him, painting the Arizona sky red and orange. After 10 months away, he was finally back. But what he saw in the valley below made his heart stop. His ranch looked different. There were new buildings he did not recognize. The fences had been changed. Strange cattle grazed in his pastures, and there, hanging over his front gate, was a sign that read McKenna Ranch, Henry McKenna, owner. "Something is very wrong here," Miguel said, riding up beside Thomas. The old foreman's face was dark with anger. Thomas spurred Thunder down the hill toward his home. His cowboys followed behind, their hands resting on their gun handles. After fighting off 3 more groups of assassins on the trail, they were all ready for trouble. As they approached the ranch house, workers came out to see who was arriving. Thomas did not recognize any of them. These were not his men. His loyal cowboys had been replaced by strangers. A tall man with a black hat walked out of the main house. It took Thomas a moment to realize it was his own brother. Henry had grown a mustache and was wearing expensive clothes. He looked like a successful ranch owner, not the failed drifter who had arrived 2 years ago. Henry's face went white when he saw Thomas. For a moment, he looked like he might faint. Then his expression changed to fake surprise and joy. "Thomas," Henry called out. "You are alive. Thank God. We thought you were dead." Thomas dismounted slowly, his eyes never leaving his brother's face. "Did you, Henry? Is that why you hung your name on my gate?" Henry laughed nervously. "That was just temporary, brother. When we did not hear from you for so long, I had to protect the ranch. There were rumors that you had died on the trail." "Rumors you started," Thomas said coldly. Several well-dressed people came out of the house behind Henry. Thomas recognized Judge Crawford, Sheriff Bradley, and banker Robert Whitman. There was also a young blonde woman Thomas did not know. "Thomas McKenna," Judge Crawford said with surprise. "We were told you had perished on the cattle drive." "As you can see, I am very much alive," Thomas replied. "And I want to know why my brother's name is on my property." Henry stepped forward, trying to look concerned. "Thomas, you look tired and upset. Come inside and rest. We can talk about everything later." "We will talk about it now," Thomas said firmly. "Where are my wives? Where are Ayana and Senna?" The blonde woman looked shocked. "Wives, plural?" Henry's face flushed red. "Thomas, this is Sarah Whitman. She and I are engaged to be married. We do not need to discuss your previous arrangements." In front of her, Thomas felt rage building in his chest. "My wives are not previous arrangements. They are my family." "Where are they?" Sheriff Bradley stepped forward. "Now see here, McKenna. You cannot come here making accusations. Henry has legal papers proving ownership of this ranch." "What papers?" Thomas demanded. Henry pulled out the fake documents. "The ones you signed before leaving, Thomas, giving me ownership in case something happened to you." Thomas looked at the papers. They were well-made forgeries, but he had never seen them before in his life. "I never signed these," Thomas said. "This is my signature, but I never wrote it on these documents." Judge Crawford examined the papers. "They look legal to me, properly witnessed and notarized. By who?" Thomas asked. "I want to see the witnesses." Henry looked uncomfortable. "The witnesses were... They have moved on. Left the territory," Miguel pushed forward. "This is all lies. Thomas never signed anything giving up his ranch." "Stay out of this, old man," Sheriff Bradley warned. "This is a legal matter." Thomas looked around at his home. Everything had been changed. The furniture was different. The Apache blankets and pottery were gone. It was like Ayana and Senna had never existed. "I am asking you one more time, Henry. Where are my wives and children?" Henry shrugged. "The Indian women left months ago. They went back to their people where they belonged. I have no idea what happened to them after that." Sarah Whitman looked confused and upset. "Indian women? Henry, you told me your brother was not married." He was not properly married, Henry said quickly. Just some primitive Apache ceremony. It means nothing under American law. Thomas grabbed Henry by the shirt and lifted him off his feet. Those women are carrying my children. What did you do to them? Put him down, Sheriff Bradley shouted, drawing his gun. That is assault. Miguel and the other cowboys also drew their weapons. For a moment, it looked like a gunfight would start right there in the ranch yard. Thomas came a quiet voice. Do not do something you will regret. Everyone turned to see Carlos, the young Mexican cowboy who had helped Ayana and Senna escape. He was walking toward them with his hands raised, showing he was not armed. Carlos, Thomas said with relief. You are still here. Tell me what happened to my wives. Carlos looked afraid, but he spoke truthfully. Henry threw them out in the winter snow with their babies. I gave them my horse, but they had to walk most of the way to the Apache village. I have not seen them since. Henry's face went red with anger. You were fired, Carlos. Get off my property. This is not your property, Thomas said, releasing Henry's shirt. And Carlos is telling the truth. Sarah Whitman stared at Henry in horror. You threw out women with newborn babies? In winter? They were trespassing, Henry said defensively. This ranch belongs to me now. Thomas felt sick thinking about his wives and children walking through snow and cold. How could you do that to innocent women and babies? They were not innocent, Henry snarled, his fake friendliness finally dropping away. They were savages corrupting a white man's ranch. You brought shame on the McKenna name by marrying them. Thomas hit Henry so hard that his brother flew backward and landed in the dirt. Those women are worth 100 of you. Judge Crawford tried to restore order. Gentlemen, please. This is a legal matter that should be settled in court. There is nothing to settle, Thomas said firmly. This is my ranch. I built it with my own hands. Henry can take his fake papers and get out. Not so fast, Sheriff Bradley said, still holding his gun. Henry has legal documents and witnesses. You just have your word. And 20 loyal cowboys who worked for me for years, Thomas replied. His men all nodded in agreement. Banker Whitman looked troubled. Sarah, perhaps we should leave. This is getting out of hand. But Sarah was staring at Henry with disgust. You lied to me about everything, did not you, Henry? You told me your brother abandoned his family. He never mentioned Indian wives or babies. Henry tried to grab her hand. Sarah, let me explain. Do not touch me, Sarah said, pulling away. I cannot marry a man who would treat women and children so cruelly. She walked to her father's carriage and climbed in. Banker Whitman followed, shaking his head in disappointment. This engagement is ended, Whitman announced before driving away. My daughter will not marry a liar and a thief. Henry watched his dreams of wealth and respectability disappear with the carriage. His face twisted with hatred as he turned back to Thomas. You have ruined everything, Henry said bitterly. Just like always, you and your Indian-loving ways have destroyed my life. You destroyed your own life with greed and lies, Thomas replied. Now get off my ranch before I throw you off. This is not over, brother, Henry said coldly. I have friends in this territory. Important friends who will help me keep what is rightfully mine. Judge Crawford and Sheriff Bradley exchanged worried looks. They had been paid well by Henry, but Thomas McKenna was alive and asking questions. Their corruption might be exposed. Perhaps we should reconsider the evidence, Judge Crawford said carefully. Thomas stared at the corrupt judge. Oh, we will reconsider everything. Starting with how you approved obviously fake legal documents. That night Thomas sat alone in his ranch house. His loyal men had thrown out Henry's workers and reclaimed the property. But Thomas felt no joy in his victory. His wives and children were somewhere in the desert, probably thinking he was dead or had abandoned them. Miguel found him sitting in the dark. We will go to Chief Naeli's village tomorrow and find them, the old foreman promised. Thomas nodded, but he was afraid of what he might find. Had Ayana and Senna survived the winter? Were his children healthy? And after months of believing themselves abandoned, would his wives even want him back? Tomorrow would bring answers to all these questions. But tonight, Thomas McKenna sat alone in his empty house, wondering if he was too late to save the family he loved more than life itself. Thomas McKenna rode through the desert toward the Apache village, his heart pounding with worry and hope. Miguel rode beside him along with 6 of his most trusted cowboys. The morning sun was already hot, but Thomas barely noticed. All he could think about was seeing Ayana, Senna, and the children he had never met. When they reached the village, Apache warriors came out to meet them. Their faces were hard and unfriendly. For a moment, Thomas thought they might be hostile. Then Chief Naeli appeared. "Thomas McKenna," the old chief said. His voice was cold as winter wind. "You have returned at last." Thomas dismounted and approached the chief with respect. "Chief Naeli, I came as soon as I could. Where are my wives? Where are my children?" The chief studied Thomas's face for a long moment. "Your wives are here. Your children are alive, but they have suffered greatly because of your family's betrayal." "Henry is not my family anymore," Thomas said firmly. "He stole my ranch and drove out my wives. I knew nothing about it until I returned yesterday." Chief Naeli's expression softened slightly. "Grey Dove said she still felt your heart connected to Ayana's, but many of our people thought you had abandoned them." "Never," Thomas said with emotion. "I would never abandon my wives or children." "May I see them?" The chief nodded toward a teepee at the edge of the village. "They are resting. Ayana has been very sick. The winter was hard, and losing her home broke something inside her." Thomas felt his heart break. "How sick?" "She grows weaker each day. She speaks of joining the spirit world to escape her pain." Thomas ran toward the teepee, fear driving him faster than he had ever moved. He pushed aside the entrance flap and saw Senna sitting beside a sleeping woman he barely recognized. Ayana lay on blankets, her face thin and pale. She had always been slender, but now she looked like a ghost. Her long black hair was dull and lifeless. Beside her, a baby boy slept peacefully. Senna looked up when Thomas entered. Her face showed shock, then joy, then anger all at the same time. "Thomas?" she whispered. "Is it really you, or am I dreaming again?" Thomas knelt beside both women. "It is really me. I am sorry it took so long to get home." Senna's eyes filled with tears. "We thought you were dead. Henry said you had died on the trail. He showed us papers saying you gave him the ranch before you left." "Those papers were lies," Thomas said gently. "I never signed anything. Henry forged my name." Ayana's eyes fluttered open. She looked at Thomas like she was seeing a spirit. "My husband," she whispered. "You have come back from the dead." Thomas took her thin hand in his. "I was never dead, my love. Henry hired men to kill me, but they failed. I fought my way home to you." Ayana tried to sit up, but she was too weak. "The babies. They are beautiful, Thomas. Strong like their father." Thomas looked at his son sleeping beside Ayana. The boy had brown hair and his mother's delicate features. In Senna's arms was a baby girl with dark hair and Thomas's strong chin. "They are perfect," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "What are their names?" "Your son is called Running Bear," Ayana said weakly. "And your daughter is Little Star." Thomas gently touched each baby's face. His children. He had missed their births, their first months of life because of his brother's evil schemes. "I will make Henry pay for what he did to you," Thomas promised. "I will get our home back and make sure you never suffer like this again." Senna shook her head sadly. "Henry has powerful friends, Thomas. Judge Crawford approved his papers. Sheriff Bradley supports his claims. Even Banker Whitman believed Henry's lies until yesterday." "What happened yesterday?" Thomas asked. "Henry was supposed to marry the banker's daughter," Senna explained. "But when she learned the truth about how he treated us, she refused to marry him. Her father is very angry. This was good news. Banker Whitman was an honest man who had been fooled by Henry's lies. With his support, Thomas might have a chance to fight Henry's corruption in court." Thomas spent the morning with his wives and children. Slowly, Ayana seemed to get stronger just from seeing him alive. She was able to sit up and hold their son. "I was ready to die," she admitted. "I thought you had abandoned us for a white woman. My heart was broken in pieces." "I could never abandon you," Thomas said, holding her close. "You and Senna and these children are everything to me." Chief Naeli entered the teepee. "Thomas McKenna, we need to talk about justice. Your brother's actions have brought shame on your name and suffering to my daughters." "This cannot stand," Thomas nodded. "I agree completely. But I want to do this the right way, through American law. If we use violence, it will only make things worse for everyone." "American law?" Chief Naeli laughed bitterly. "American law says my daughters are not your real wives. American law says their children have no rights. Why should we trust American law? Because if we do this right, we can expose the corruption and make sure it never happens again," Thomas explained. "Henry bribed Judge Crawford and Sheriff Bradley. If we can prove that, we can get real justice." Miguel entered the teepee with important news. "Thomas, I have been talking to people in town. Carlos told me more about what happened while you were gone." "What did you learn?" Thomas asked. Henry forged documents to take ownership of the ranch. He bribed Judge Crawford to approve them. He hired men to threaten anyone who supported you, and he stole money from the ranch accounts to pay for everything. This was exactly the kind of evidence Thomas needed. "Can Carlos prove any of this in court?" "Maybe," Miguel said. "But he is scared." Henry threatened to have him killed if he ever told the truth. Thomas turned to Chief Naily. "Give me 2 weeks to gather evidence and build a legal case. If American law fails us, then we will do things your way." The old chief considered this. 2 weeks. "But if your American law does not give us justice, then Apache justice will take its place." Thomas understood the threat. If he could not defeat Henry legally, Chief Naily would declare war on the ranch. Blood would be spilled and innocent people would die. Over the next week, Thomas worked frantically to build his case. He rode to the territorial capital to file complaints against Judge Crawford and Sheriff Bradley. He gathered evidence of Henry's forged documents and stolen money. Banker Whitman proved to be a valuable ally. He was angry about being deceived and wanted to help expose the truth. "Henry borrowed money using your ranch as collateral," Whitman explained. "He owes the bank thousands of dollars. If he does not own the ranch legally, then he committed fraud." Thomas also found the men who had witnessed Henry's fake documents. Just as Henry had claimed, they had left the territory. But Thomas tracked them down and learned they had been paid to lie. "Henry gave us $50 each to sign papers saying we saw you sign over the ranch," one man admitted. "We knew it was wrong, but the money was too good to pass up." This was the breakthrough Thomas needed. He had witnesses who would testify that Henry had bribed them to create false evidence. But Henry was fighting back too. He hired a lawyer from back east and spread rumors that Thomas had abandoned his family and gone crazy living with Indians. "Thomas McKenna is not mentally fit to own property," Henry's lawyer argued. "He has been corrupted by savage influences and cannot make rational decisions." Judge Crawford, desperate to protect himself, supported Henry's claims. Perhaps Thomas McKenna should be examined by doctors before his property rights are restored. This was a clever trap. If Thomas agreed to the examination, Henry's corrupt friends could declare him insane. If he refused, people might believe he really was mentally unstable. Sarah Whitman provided unexpected help. She was so disgusted by Henry's lies that she agreed to testify about his deceptions. "Henry told me his brother was dead," she said in a sworn statement. "He never mentioned Indian wives or children. He lied about everything to trick me into marriage." But the biggest breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the men Henry had hired to kill Thomas was captured by cavalry soldiers. Facing execution for murder, the man agreed to testify in exchange for his life. "Henry McKenna paid me $500 to kill his brother on the trail to Kansas," the assassin admitted. He wanted Thomas dead so he could keep the ranch permanently. This confession changed everything. Henry was not just a thief, he was a would-be murderer. Even his corrupt allies began to abandon him when they realized the truth. Judge Crawford quietly left the territory in the middle of the night. Sheriff Bradley resigned and fled to Mexico. Banker Whitman demanded immediate repayment of Henry's loans. But Henry had one last card to play. He gathered a group of hired gunmen and barricaded himself at the ranch. "I will not give up what is rightfully mine," Henry declared. "If Thomas wants this ranch, he will have to take it by force." Thomas stood outside his own home with Miguel, his cowboys, and a dozen Apache warriors led by Chief Naily. The final confrontation was about to begin. The winter wind whistled across the Arizona desert as Thomas McKenna stood with his allies outside his own ranch house. Inside, Henry had barricaded himself with 6 hired gunmen, refusing to surrender. The standoff had lasted 3 days. "Henry," Thomas called out, "this is your last chance to give up peacefully. The territorial marshal is coming with federal troops. You cannot win this fight." Henry's voice came from inside the house, bitter and angry. "I would rather die than let you take back what should be mine." Chief Naily stood beside Thomas, his face grim. "My warriors grow impatient. Let us end this now with fire and bullets." "No," Thomas said firmly. "Too many innocent people have suffered already. We do this the right way." Miguel approached with good news. "Boss, the territorial marshal just arrived with 20 soldiers. Henry's men are surrounded." Marshal James Harrison was a tough, honest lawman who had come from the capital to investigate the corruption in the local government. He had arrest warrants for Henry, Judge Crawford, and Sheriff Bradley. "Henry McKenna," the marshal called through a speaking trumpet. You are under arrest for fraud, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. Surrender now or face the consequences." From inside the house came the sound of arguing voices. Henry's hired gunmen were not eager to fight federal troops. The odds against them were hopeless. One by one, the gunmen came out with their hands raised. Only Henry remained inside, alone and defiant. "I built this ranch," Henry shouted from a window. Thomas was just a dreamer who married savages and wasted everything. Thomas felt pity for his brother despite everything that had happened. "Henry, please come out. No one else needs to die today. You destroyed my life," Henry screamed back. "Sarah was going to marry me. I was going to be somebody important. Then you came back and ruined everything." Marshal Harrison had heard enough. "We are coming in, McKenna. Dead or alive, you are coming with us." The soldiers stormed the house. There was a brief gunfight, then silence. When the smoke cleared, Henry McKenna lay dead on the floor of his brother's home, a pistol in his hand. Thomas stared down at Henry's body. His little brother, who had started life with so much promise, had died alone and bitter, destroyed by his own greed and hatred. "I am sorry it ended this way," Marshal Harrison said quietly. But Henry made his choice when he chose crime over family. Chief Nayeli placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Some men choose evil over good. You cannot save someone who will not save himself." The legal aftermath moved quickly. Marshal Harrison had brought an honest territorial judge who voided all of Henry's fake documents. The real ownership papers, locked in the ranch safe, proved that Thomas was the rightful owner of everything. Banker Whitman worked to untangle the financial mess. Henry stole over $3,000 from ranch accounts and borrowed another $2,000 using forged papers. "But I will work out a payment plan to help you recover." More importantly, the judge issued official certificates recognizing Thomas's marriages to Ayanna and Senna under territorial law. Their children were declared legitimate heirs to the McKenna Ranch. "Your wives and children now have full legal protection," the judge explained. "Anyone who threatens them will face federal charges." Thomas rode to the Apache village to bring his family home. He found Ayanna much stronger now that hope had returned to her life. Senna was excited about returning to the ranch house where she had been happy. "Are you sure we will be safe?" Ayanna asked, holding young Running Bear. "What if other white people try to hurt us like Henry did?" Thomas took her hand gently. "Times are changing, my love. The territorial government is backing our family now, and Chief Nayeli has made it clear that any harm to you means war with the Apache people." The journey back to the ranch was a celebration. Apache women had prepared beautiful new clothes for Ayanna and Senna. The babies rode in decorated cradle boards made by their aunts and grandmothers. When they reached the ranch, Thomas saw how much work was needed. Henry's neglect and theft had left the property in poor condition. Buildings needed repair, fences were broken, and most of the cattle were gone. But Thomas felt hopeful for the first time in months. His family was together and safe. He had loyal friends willing to help rebuild. Most importantly, he had learned who could be trusted and who could not. Sarah Whitman surprised everyone by visiting the ranch a week later. She came with her father to apologize for ever believing Henry's lies. "I feel terrible about what happened to your wives," she told Thomas. "Henry fooled all of us with his false charm." Ayanna and Senna welcomed Sarah graciously, showing no bitterness about her former engagement to Henry. The banker's daughter was impressed by their kindness and dignity. "I would like to help your family in any way I can," Sarah offered. "Perhaps I could teach English to your children when they are older." This was the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Sarah became a regular visitor to the ranch, learning about Apache culture while sharing her own knowledge and skills. Spring brought new hope to the McKenna Ranch. Thomas hired back his old workers and began rebuilding his cattle herds. Chief Nayeli provided young Apache men who wanted to learn the cattle business. Mexican and white cowboys worked alongside Apache hands, creating a unique partnership. Carlos, the young cowboy who had helped Ayanna and Senna escape Henry's cruelty, became the new foreman when Miguel decided to retire. The old Mexican had earned a comfortable cabin on ranch land and a pension for his years of faithful service. "You saved my family when I could not," Thomas told Carlos. "I will never forget that loyalty." The ranch slowly prospered again. Thomas was more careful now about who he trusted and how he managed the business. He kept detailed records and made sure all legal documents were properly filed with honest officials. Ayana regained her strength and health as happiness returned to her life. She established a small clinic on the ranch where she used her healing knowledge to help both Apache and white families in the area. Her reputation as a skilled medicine woman spread throughout the territory. Senna proved to have a gift for managing the ranch's financial records. She learned to read and write English quickly and helped Thomas keep track of cattle sales, supply purchases, and worker wages. Her sharp mind for numbers impressed even banker Whitman. The children grew strong and healthy. Running Bear was a serious boy who loved to follow his father around the ranch, learning about horses and cattle. Little Star was more adventurous, always getting into mischief and making everyone laugh with her bold spirit. As months passed, the ranch became a symbol of cooperation between different peoples. Apache families came to trade horses and craft work. Mexican vaqueros shared their knowledge of cattle handling. White settlers found they could trust Thomas to deal fairly with everyone. Thomas built a small school on the ranch where Apache, Mexican, and white children learned together. Sarah Whitman became the teacher, helping all the children read and write in both English and Spanish. Chief Nayeli insisted that Apache language and customs also be taught, preserving the old ways alongside the new. 1 year after Henry's death, Thomas stood on his porch watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in brilliant colors. Ayana sat beside him nursing their second son, a baby born healthy and strong. Senna was teaching Little Star to braid beads while Running Bear played with wooden horses carved by his Apache grandfather. "Do you ever think about Henry?" Ayana asked quietly. Thomas nodded sadly. "I wonder what made him so bitter and greedy. We had the same parents, the same opportunities. But he chose hatred, while I chose love. Perhaps his heart was broken in some way we never understood," Ayana suggested with her usual wisdom. "But we cannot let his darkness poison our light." Miguel walked up to the porch, moving slowly but still strong at 70 years old. "Boss, the cattle count is finished. We have over 600 head now, all healthy and fat." Thomas smiled. The ranch was more prosperous than ever before, but more importantly, it was a place where different peoples could live and work together in peace. "Any word from the territorial capital about statehood?" Thomas asked. Miguel grinned. "They say Arizona might become a real state within 10 years. When that happens, you should run for the territorial legislature. The territory needs honest men who understand all its peoples." Thomas had not considered politics before, but the idea appealed to him. He had learned the importance of good government through his battle with corruption. Maybe he could help build a better future for his children and all the families in Arizona. Chief Nayeli arrived as the stars began appearing in the darkening sky. The old Apache leader had become a regular visitor to the ranch, enjoying his role as grandfather to Running Bear and Little Star. "My daughters look happy," the chief observed, watching Ayana and Senna with their children. "They have made me the luckiest man in the territory," Thomas replied. "I almost lost everything through my brother's evil. But I gained something even more valuable, the knowledge of who truly loves me." Sarah Whitman joined them on the porch after finishing the evening lessons. She had never married, choosing instead to dedicate her life to education and helping the mixed community around the ranch. "The children are all doing so well," she reported. "Running Bear can already read better than some adults. And Little Star has a gift for mathematics that reminds me of her mother."